do a number of things in my life, mostly dancing, and most recently, in 1988, I was elected to the Chicago Cree Business Committee, where I served for about 18 years, the last 4 as chairman. And in that time, being in the political field, I never realized how important the land was associated with the cultural resources of tribes, not only my tribe, but many tribes. Every day when you get up and you look south, you'll see those mountains, and it's a beautiful sight. And a lot of people come and go from Havre that really don't understand the nature of the land. I was a part of my grandfather's life, Windy Boy, and my grandmother standing on the cloud. We used to live in log houses in the 50s, and in the 60s, no electricity or running water. There were 9 of us, my brothers and sisters, but they used to farm us out. Right next door is my grandmother and grandma. That's right. And lifestyle at that time was like now. The sun goes down early, gets dark right away, and the first thing is old folks is get to bed. So there we make our cots on the dirt floor in the log house at about 6 o'clock and wide awake. But as time went on, I didn't realize these old stories that these grandma and grandpa talk about were legend stories about how we became where we're at and what's good we have. And with that, when we went to bed, good stories, good thoughts embedded in our minds. So as time went this way, everybody's life is altered in some sort. Well, my dad wanted to become a rancher in 1959. So he bought 50 head of cows, and we were in the mountains. So we eventually moved north quite a ways. Nearest neighbor about 2 miles, and that's where we lived. And as time went this way, you look at the makeup of the mountains. My grandfather and I were walking one day. We got on a hill, and he said, "You see all these mountains at the top?" I said, "Yeah." When you look at them, every one of those mountaintops have their own personality. Every one of them. But you should understand what that personality of each one of them. Mountains such as Haystack, Centennial, Baldy, and the list goes on. Incidentally, the proper name for Baldy isn't that. That happened later. That particular mountain is called Mite, meaning heart mountain. And I asked Grandpa, why heart? So he said, when you look at North America, and when you look and find that turtle as he's sitting, right there where the Bear Paw Mountains, that's where the heart of that turtle is. So that's why they call it so. Even other tribes refer to that as heart in their language. The significance of that mountain is quite great, not only to my tribe, but many tribes. About 1959, 1960, I was probably about 9, 10 years old. Those old folks, we used to camp there. A number of families, Weasel Boys, Eagle Mans, Windy Boys, and the list goes on. And we used to camp there in the summertime, and the older boys used to get wood, get logs, whatever. Us younger ones, there's old folks that take us literally around that mountain, telling us about different sights and features. There was one site there, just directly east. It's when one looks at it, it's an actual chair of rock, and old folks call that Creator's Chair. A lot of my people don't know everything that I'm talking about here, but the significance of that is many people can't walk.
Many people can't climb up that our Creator made that for them to pay homage to Him. So those are still there. And what really got me thinking here is my cousin, there was a fire, you probably heard that 12,000 acre plus fire out there. And one of the pictures he took was on top of Baldy, up there, literally burning up, I guess. And that's, it made me rethink about those days when I was younger, and all those 11 sites that are significant to us. That chair was used by a number of prominent people of other tribes. Chief Joseph used it and his people. Sitting Bull, Sioux, they used it. Gall, and a number of other tribes, Blackfoots, used that chair, and they knew the significance of that, just like my people. Centennial, they call the mountain Centennial. It's really not, that's not really its name. That came later. But anyway, as I got off tribal politics, I realized that, and talking to people, particularly younger people, knew nothing, particularly the features there. So I took it upon myself to do that. My cousin, Bruce Sunchild, called me one day and asked me if I would do the Tribal Historic Preservation Program for the tribe. I said, yeah, I probably could do that just for a little while, though. So I didn't realize I could do that for 12 years. So anyway, and rethinking a lot about what had happened. I had 3 elderly guys that I worked with, the late Duncan Standing Rock, late Vidal Stump, and the late Charlie Gopher. And we did a lot of research, like in Rocky Boy, you know. We counted 152 homes that were built by our people, log homes, and mapped out the locations where they were, even though they're not there again. And then the second type of homes was what they call soup line homes. And there too, we identified all the sites there, even though they're not there. There's a few buildings of that kind left. Then the third type was what I call Schmidt homes. There was a farmer west of Box Elder that the government agent hired to build these homes. He built about over 20 of them, and we've got 3 that are still up, and they're older than 50 years, so they could qualify for the National Historic Properties Inventory. So when you look at the bear paws, they have a lot of meaning to us. In fact, in the early 1800s, around there, we had an elder from, I believe he was a Grovemont, according to my old folks, and his name was, I slipped the name, but he had a book that's put out. Bull Lodge was his name, and the book was 7 Visions of Bull Lodge. Never read it, but everything that he acquired was from that, what they call Square Butte, which is just east of Box Elder. So in 2010, 2011, we had a large flood in Rocky Boy, and it altered and unearthed a lot of sites within that tributaries of Rocky Boy. So I had a friend who was a professor at University of Montana, Dr. Anna Prentice, called her and if we can do an inventory. So they did. They spent 2 years doing the inventory, finding a lot of impact features within those tributaries. So as a result of that, we did an inventory of not only that, but other places. And I've got photos of way back, she figured about the 1700s, where there were rock features about 4 feet high and perpendicular to that mountain, 2 of them. And then when that flood unearthed a huge buffalo jump. And when you go out there, you can literally see the skulls sticking out of the rock. So we identified that, and unfortunately, people came by and curious and pillaged most of that. But what they did was they took photos and mapped out where they were at, from Box Elder all the way up to what is now Parker Canyon, Parker School, and parts of Haystack. So we decided a lot of that stuff that was getting picked up, we decided to extract that and house them in a temporary facility in Rocky Boy. And they tell me I got a picture of my grandpa here somewhere. But talking to my grandpa, he left here, and I believe it was 1993. He was 90. He was born in 1895. I know that. But he lived in Rocky Boy, and he was never really a politician, nor was he a ceremonial person. He was just a plain average Joe Indian, I guess. And my grandma, her people, her grandparents lived east of the Crazy Mountains. My late cousin and I were talking to her one day, and we asked where we're at. She's describing this, and I said, Grandma, how about you take us down and show us? So she did. Next day, she loaded up. We went down east of the Crazy Mountains, got to the place where they lived, and showed us all the log houses that they built, the corrals, whatnot. And when you're talking 2 generations, that's probably about 100+ years that they lived there. Told me all about the sites, and they told me about the plants that they used to gather, their little natural garden they used to have, and the game that was plentiful in those mountains that they survived. It wasn't until about when the state, Montana became a state, they had to move, and they spent most of their life there. And the only place where they could go is there was a group of Crees and Chippewas in Garrison, Montana. That's where they went. That's how my family became part of Rocky Boy. Rocky Boy, the Chippewa tribe, is kind of unique in its own way. And I can go on and talk about Chippewa because the elder that I worked with had a lot of wealth of Ojibwe direction. We used to think, Chippewas, you come from Michigan, you come from Wisconsin, Minnesota. No, but this particular band went further back into the Poconos Mountains of eastern Pennsylvania. So when we go places, when we look at mountains, it tells us one thing: the sacredness of those mountaintops. Each individual, like Haystack Butte, has a significance to my people. Centennial has a significance. Square Butte has a significance. They all have, and when we had, certainly thank Greg Kegel and his staff, where we had them build through youth build our office there. And there was no money involved by the tribe to do it because I want to do it on our own. And so that office that we have up there was built here on campus and moved out. Most of the labor to move it out there was all donated. And I owe a lot of gratitude to a lot of people that helped out and contributed to that. The goal of the tribe and any tribe is unknown, particularly in light of the way politics are playing. And I hadn't voted in, I think it's 12 years. Why I didn't vote? Because I didn't want to vote. But anyway, when we talk about the bear paws, the heart of that turtle in that area, I stayed a while in a place called Small Boy Camp in Rocky Mountain House. My grandpa, Windy Boy's older brother, took his people from Muskogee or Hobima and took them into the mountains to get away from Western civilization. I spent a time with them, and one day I was chopping wood for him, and he come out and sat on outside there, his tent. And I said in my back of my mind, I want to ask him something. And so I got done there, and I sat by him, and I told him in Cree, I said, "Hey, Muslim, pega me koichim tanoma." And he said, "Thank you, Grandpa, I want to ask you something." He said, "If I know it, I'll tell you. When you guys pray, when you use your pipe, you talk about this place over here, Apitagisia, halfway to the east. You talk about this Mantu no." He looked at me, and Mantu no in Cree is Creator's home. Huh? So I said, "That must be a real good place." He looked at me, "Hey, son, no, grandson." He said, "You don't know where that is?" And I said, "No." "Oh, my brother, he didn't tell you then. Where that is, that's where you live, Rocky Boy, those mountains." So and he explained why. "Oh," and I told him, "Well, now I know." So that the significance of that is not only important to my two tribes, but other tribes. When we expanded, when I was on shortly after I got off, these 3 elders, they were going to expand East Fork Dam. And we then again called Dr. Prentice. And they were ready to start their big machines and start. And they asked us if we could do an assessment of that whole area where those kraals are, that area there. So we were sitting there that morning before everybody came, and this old guy said, "Why do we have to do it here?" He said, "Why don't we do it where they're going to take all this dirt and expand that dam?" So we told a couple of people, and that's what had happened. So we had Dr. Prentice, U of M archaeology department, do that whole area, and we got some pictures where heavy equipment was operating, and we found a number of tools in that area. So when you go up there, everything that was in that dam has been extracted, sits in our little archaeology or our little center on the hill. And the reports, they worked with University of California, Davis, who did a lot of these work that looked at even those round rock stones that our people use in cooking there. And when you look at the report, it tells all the meat, the roots that was used to make that soup. It was really, really interesting. So when I talk, I also like to answer questions if there's any questions that need to be asked.
How far back do your people go in this area that you were around?
Well, if I sit down, huh? When you're 72, your bucking horse days are over, and your dancing days are done left. But anyway, that's a question I always get asked by particularly students. I just was in Belknap last weekend, and I certainly commend a young feller by the name of Tuffy Helgeson. Sent 2 of his, what we call handymen, to come do protocol. Came to my house and asked if I would come and do a presentation to the handymen there. I said, sure, I'd be glad to. So last Sunday I went out and took my kids, 2 of my kids, and I went out to Lodgepole, and I talked about legend stories, songs and dances of long ago. You know, old folks tell us, you don't belong here, you don't belong there, over there, or down there. Then my cousin asked him, well, where do we belong then? We belong all in between that. And they use that turtle as an example. The same rock up here is related to the same rock down here in California. Likewise Florida, likewise way up there. And then that head of that turtle is faces that way. And this particular Ojibwe tribe uses that as a guide. There are many Ojibwe tribes, but this one's unique, very unique, in that this Rocky boy was born in Wisconsin area. I believe it's a Bad River. But his dad, his name was Pikochet, he took over the plight of his dad when they left the Poconos Mountains. So that particular band originated there. So, and there's many history along the ways, and certainly footnotes of historical markers that people today only can hear but never see. I was involved with the Keystone Pipeline about 3-4 years ago in its height, and I was more concerned about the mapping, the direction that was going to take. And there was a number of cultural people that was involved, and of all times, I took my one daughter and I had one friend with me down to a meeting in Cheyenne River Indian Reservation. And that day that we were there was the day that they got converged on by the authorities. So anyway, when we left, it made me think about some history that my grandpa talked about. And one of those, to address your question, was the old folks always said, we don't own the land. We can't claim the land. No matter who you are, no matter who we are. Everything is on loan to us. Everything. The rock, the air, the plants, the animals, where they're all on loan to this earth to survive. And you can't, we as tribes, whether it's Sioux, Assiniboine, Cree, whatever, we can't say we own the land, because we don't. We're merely here to survive, and everything around us is about survival, even by today's standards. But that particular Chippewa tribe, I sat many hours with this old guy and explained. In fact, the day before he left 3 years ago, his kids called me, and I just live over the hill from him, called me and he said, Dad wants to talk to you, wants to see you. So I stopped what I was doing, I went over and seen him. But then he couldn't talk, so we sign language each other. And I told him, Niri Chog, and hey, my friend, I seen and heard what you talked about with this document. He looked at me and he gave me a thumbs up. So I told him I have an archaeologist from that was educated in UK, and she called some of her friends at that museum, and what he used to talk about was a treaty that was signed pre-1776 back there. And in this treaty, there were two of them, one for his people and one that sits. And this lady found that at that museum in the UK. Someday, some rich day when I win that $1 billion Powerball, I'll go over and take a look at it. But in relation to your question, we're everywhere. We live everywhere. We understand everything as far as the makeup of the land.
You talk a lot about conversations with your grandfather and understanding the personality or the uniqueness in all those places, you're having those same conversations with your grandkids, I take it?
Yeah. Grandkids and kids. I got 15 kids.
Yeah.
52 on down to 8. But yeah, and, with me, I can't leave anything here. But what I can leave is not only the thought, but also what my dad and my grandfather in life. Not all of us, I tell them, not all of us can be doctors. Not all of us can be lawyers. Not all of us can be that. I chose ranching because I want to do what my dad done. And he always said, "But hey, son, you always got to remember, people have to eat." So.
But I've got a question about the Cree people as a Cree nation. So we've got this political border that separates the Cree people north and south in Canada and the United States. But culturally, can you talk about how the relationship between the Canadian Cree and the Montana Cree?
There's really no difference. I spent this last summer taking my kids and my grandkids to sundances up there. Talk the same language, but there's different dialects up there, going far back as is it Nova Scotia this way, and a lot of words I can understand there to here. And I always ask my kids, I said, Cree, ask someone what Cree means. So they ask there, it's a different interpretation. I told them where Cree come from, that was given to us by the dominant society. According to my grandpa, during the days of St. Lawrence River, when these people come up the river, they couldn't understand this one group of people, so they called them Kristano. And then later on, they cut that to Cree, K-R-I, and later on it becomes C-R-E. So I tell my kids, if you ask someone, a fluent Cree speaker, what does Cree mean in Cree? They can't tell you, because it's not their word. Then my daughter said, "Oh, what did they call us? What do we call ourselves?" And Nehio Inwag, that's us. So I have to explain, when you count in Cree to 4, big, niso, and so neo, nehio, neo, 4-bodied people. That's the original name of us. And as far as imaginary line, that's one project I wanna undertake is when the wise ways of the government, when they created this line, they didn't take into consideration the relationship that we had already had. Getting back to my comment about Keystone Pipeline, in my research I found that the State Department did some extensive research on tribes and the origination of tribes. The part that I found very astonishing with them was they didn't go to the American Fur Trading Company or Hudson Bay. What they did is they went to the notes of the trappers, traders, and frontiersmen. Naturally, they went to a trading post. They traded their notes for knives or gunpowder or whatever. So that's where they went. And when you look at the report, it talks about all the tribes that they encountered. So lo and behold, there was a band of Crees, northern Nebraska, northern Colorado, all the way to the eastern part of Idaho. And then I got to thinking, hey, that's what my grandma said that. That's how they ended up where they're at, long before this, 1776. With the Ojibwa, back in the Poconos Mountains, this one, I want to talk about this one that I witnessed. This old man, this Ojibwe guy, he always talked about that area back there. And lo and behold, I did a presentation to USET. What USET stands for, United Southeastern Tribes, an organization from Florida up to Maine. And when when I did this presentation, and I thanked all of Narragansett, Passamaquoddy, all these tribes, I thanked them. I said, for taking care of my elders' lands over there. And they didn't understand it, so I told them the history about that tribe. Lo and behold, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, the elders of that northeast area called me, and they said, we were talking about you, and in reference to one of the stories you talked about, your people being back here, and one of our history stories indicate there was a tribe there, and one day they were all gone. They left everything. And I said, yeah, this old guy that I'm talking to said the same thing. Back before 1776, they had asked all these tribes to get together because there's going to be a new form of government that's going to be presented, and tribes are going to be a part of that. So this old man, this Rocky Boy's grandfather, when he heard that, he went back to his people and reminded them, when that time comes, when the fair-skinned man comes to give you a new way of doing government. He said, you will take our people and go to the backbone of this earth, which is the Rocky Mountains. He said, there appears to be survival there. Didn't say there was, that appears to be survival. That was up to the people. So that day, they uplifted everything and took off west. Along the way, that old man, he passed away, and is in one of those mounds in Ohio or Indiana, one of the mounds. His boy, Pico, had continued along the way. And in my research, I see where they had stopped in a number of forts to trade for cooking utensils, food, bacon, like that. And it got to Fort Snelling in Minnesota. I seen where Rocky Boy also, as a young man, was trading stuff, gunpowder, flour, things like that. So then he was born not too far, Wisconsin, and that's how he ended up in control of taking his people, fulfilling his grandfather's request. There was an area, Burlington, North Dakota, I believe it's called, just about 3 miles from there, a fork in the creek coming from the north and west. They camped there, this Ojibwa tribe. And there were two people, Rocky Boy, one of them. The other one was named Ochis. They decided to split their band up. One was going to go north. He's going to take some people here. The Rocky Boys can continue west. And the only involvement these Chippewas had with this Pembina band was north of Grand Forks, where they stopped, visited them, and continued on. That's the only involvement that this tribe had with the Pembina. Back in the 60s, 70s, then we become Pembinas. The only reason we become Pembinas, hey, a Pembina payment coming. But according to the old guy, we didn't have much, and that's the only involvement that they had. So when that tribe split up, Ochis took a bunch north. They are now a reserve just west of Rocky Mountain House, north of Rocky Mountain House, called Ochis Reserve. That's where that band comes from. But the traditional people live inside the Rocky Mountains. That's who we have been conversing with. Rocky Boy didn't make it to where he was going, and that's the Banana Belt of Montana. Where would that be? That's over across Stevensville, in that area. But they got as far as Garrison, and by then my grandpa and my grandma were already born, and that's where they lived. So I asked my grandpa, I said, so how come they put you in 3 different reservations? Well, because they wanted us to meld in to the tribes there. And the first tribe they put them on was Salish and Kootenai. They stayed there a year, different language, different way of life, different things. So they went left and went back to Garrison with a mindset going back over through the hills. The second one, they were rounded up, were then taken to Crow. They spent a couple of years in Crow. That's where a lot of my people were married into Crows. My grandma's sisters married a Crow. So then they left again. And this time, they were taken to Blackfeet. That's by the time 4 prominent non-Indian people are trying to assist Rocky Boy. Frank Bird Linderman, that Russell artist Charlie Russell, Paris Gibson, and I forgot the fourth guy. But they went out of their way to help Rocky Boy get this land. And I told my grandpa, if you were over there and you were going to come here, he said we were told by those people at the Sundance in Browning that they think they can get this 55,000 acres. So by then, the old man Rocky was getting sick. And then I asked Grandpa, I said, did you ever meet him, that old man? Yeah, he said. Then I got sitting. He was a really kind man. All those tribes that they were all kind to him because of his nature. And there's a picture sitting in the tribal office with all the beadwork that he had. My people didn't make that. The people of Salish and Kootenai beaded that for him because of his nature. So when I asked my grandpa then, what thing did you encounter? Oh, one time, he said, he's talking in Cree. One time my dad's name was Big Wind. And they told us we were supposed to meet at Fort Assiniboine right here. So early in the morning, he said, I went with my dad. We got on an old bus, he said, railroad track south of Browning. So we got on, we took off. Cut Bank Creek, he said, he was going up like that, and all of a sudden that old bus started chugging. That bus driver stopped. He said, our gas line is freezing, he said. But if you passengers can go up on top, there's a restaurant there. So Indians, whites are all on it. So we walking through the snow, got to the top up there, and this lady must have been a waitress, he said. He said we sat down, and my dad, he looked at me. He told me in Cree, do you talk this obscure language, this white man language? I told him no. Why? He said, take it on him, he said. And so that then this lady came. She must have had a tablet, pencil. And she must told him, he said, what they want to order. My dad looked at me. He said in Cree, he said, how do you say eggs in white man language? I told my dad, I don't know. And so does my dad, he looked down like that. And he turned and looked at that woman. He looked her right in the eye like that, and he said, thee eat. And then he went, and she understood. Oh, you want eggs? So she wrote that down, and then he turned to me, I looked at my dad, and he said, how do you say goose? Pig, huh? I don't know, he said. And he, the same thing, he turned to her like that, and he looked at her, and he grabbed his finger, and he told her, oh, you want sausage or bacon? So that's how they ate. I guess the point with that story is survival. Huh? My people survived the best way they can. This line that gentleman talked about, I don't recognize that. We don't recognize. In fact, the Jay Treaty recognizes that free trade. 27 tribes in this northern border. That's another issue I want to tackle at some point. Because not only relevant to my tribe, but my mom's tribe east of us. And I leave you with this. I'm very concerned as a former tribal leader, as a former whatever, politician. But I fear for my young ones, not only mine, but other tribes. As I sat talking to 21 kids in Lodgepole last week, and the questions they were asking were very basic questions. I'm concerned about my young folks. I have to deal with, like every other community, drugs. As it's rampant all over. That's what concerns me. And we can't live our kids' life, and not any of us, but we certainly can guide them and give them the best opportunity, whatever that might be. That's what I'm concerned about and what I see in my community and other Indian communities. The way tribes are operating, I'm very concerned, very concerned. So after saying that, any other questions?
I'm curious about the drugs, because I'm actually doing a contemporary epidemics class right now. We're looking at the opioid epidemic and substance abuse and the like. And we're just kind of looking at what are some of the biggest threats, what are some of the opportunities to address it. And we talked to the drug treatment courts and some of the rehab centers and the police and the sheriffs to get their perspectives. But I'm kind of curious, your perspectives on addressing this. Like, you know, if you see any opportunities or particular barriers or particular threats, if you have any particular ideas or thoughts on that.
You know, when you talk about epidemics, as an example, you know, those old folks, my grandma and my grandpa, they talked about something coming. And it's not only going to affect the dominant society, but it's also going to affect our people. And when that time came, that's what I thought it was, COVID-19 or whatever that was. But even then, they said, no. He said, there's medicinal plants that address that. It's just knowing what those are and how to use them, how to prepare them. And when I go back to other potential impediments, not only dealing with my people, but people in general, and I don't know if we'll ever get over that awful word called racism. And that's what I'm trying to do. You know, growing up in Rocky Boy, I went to school here in Havre, 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade. And it was quite a task to get us here. We lived 2 miles off the road. To get to the bus, we had to run down in the snow to catch a bus. We go all around to the agency, get on another bus, come all the way to Havre, drop us off over here. And then I became friends with a lot of non-Indian people here at that time. Mostly those that are rancher kids. That was the first connection. So the Wades and the Seas, all these Solomons, all these families, we became good friends. And my dad, where he used to live, we used to have 2 milk cows, my younger brother and I. Their names was Bessie and Bossy. I know that. But we'd have a bell, we'd ring it, and here those cows would come and go right exactly where they knew where to go in the shed. And there we were, twice a day. My old brother, he said, boy, when I grow up, I ain't gonna do this no more. So I went to school here, and then I was talking to my friends there. This one guy, I didn't know, he just left me. As a friend of mine, Larry Sasaki. We were talking there before school started. How are you doing? He told me. He said, tired. Why? He said, My dad had, Mom have us, me and my brother milk cows twice a day. Really? He said, by hand? I said, yeah. He said, how come we don't get a milking needle? Really? Is there such a thing? Yeah, I said, they sell them. So when I got home, hey, Dad, how come you didn't tell us about a milking needle? He said, because you didn't ask. So next day we had milk. Well, it made things there real smooth. With a reference to there's a solution out there. There's a solution for every one of us in what we seek. It's just us as humans putting ourselves in the right spot here and here. To me, you're only seeing the visual part of me, not knowing the spiritual part of me. Because my grandpa and grandma would say, there's two of you. I looked at him, you mean two of me? I thought another Alvin or another clone. No, there's two of you. He said, look at the Gawi Noasi, this earth, he said. Right in the middle, what do you call that? What do you call that?
The center.
Equator.
Equator.
The equator. He said, we as Indian people have to be considerate of the other Indian people down here, South America. We trade off, just like now. It's probably spring over there. And that's one of the unwritten laws that we have to adhere to. And as you as a native person, he said, because they call you Nehiog Inawag, we talk about foreign. Your hand, he said, is a guide for you, every one of us that have, and that's our guide in life. It kind of confused me. And I was trying to digest it, and later on I went to my grandpa and grandma again. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you see these here, when you count big, these are four-bodied people. There are laws. There's only 4 laws that we Cree people adhere to, and many other tribes. Really? Laws? Yeah, he said, they're not our laws. It's laws that we have to abide by. What do you mean? I told him. First law, what do you think that would be? He said. I thought, Lahan, I don't know. What is it, Grandpa? Creator's law. When you understand Creator's law and everything associated with that, then you go to the next one. The second law. What would that be, he told me? That would be, I don't know, natural law. Look out there, the grass, the trees, the roots, the plants, the animals, all those. Because their only mission is one thing, survival and reproduction of survival. And the third law, he said, ceremony law. When you go to rain dance, giveaway dance, ghost dance, horse dance, all these ceremonies, there are certain things that we do, like a rain dance. It later changed the term to sun dance. When you go in, automatically, instinctively, women go one side, men go the other. There's a whole host of things that we as indigenous people are supposed to. I heard a new one the other day, indigenous creature. I guess that's what I, but anyway. And the fourth law, kind of confusing when he told us to me. He said that's human law. Human law. Understand all the laws associated with the human. Because when you understand and be told about all these 4 laws, then this law will kick in after you understand all this. When I get back to your question, that's a problem that I've seen in my observation, is my people don't even elders, even new elders, as I call them. They call me elder. I'm no elder. I'm no elder. I'm just an inquisitive guy trying to survive. Did I answer you?
Give you some things to think about. Thank you.
My grandpa never wore shoes before, moccasins all the time. In fact, my grandpa and my grandma told this to me. He said, you know, your grandpa's Timmy Kogi, so your grandpa's a really fast runner. You know that? No. Why? I said, one time, she said, have her over there by what is now that Republican Center, that area right there. She said, right there, they got the fastest runner in Fort Belknap. Really? I said, who is that? I said, she told me his name. I didn't find out later on until I asked my grandpa, Henry First Race, that he told me it was oh, you're talking about Dick King. We used to be really fast. Here the sheriff, I forgot the guy's name, got them together, and they're going to foot race right there, 100-yard dash. Because my grandpa used to hunt rabbits, kick them over, sage hens, on foot, no tool or anything. I seen that. And I didn't know what to tell my grandpa. We got to the house. He had some prairie chickens and he had some rabbits. And I put them on the table. And, hey, my grandma said, hey, you had a good day, huh? And he said, yeah, I didn't know this guy could run that. That's when she told that story. The day that these two fastest runner in Fort Belknap and him raced. And they're calling my grandpa, just like me, I was late. They kept calling him, hey, Windy Boy, you want it over here? And this guy was already ready. So out of the crowd, this guy came, there's my grandpa, moccasins, and he got ready. He took his shirt off, he had a t-shirt on, and he rolled up his pants. And no starting box, just like that. As Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. So with that, I want to thank you guys, and I'm on a mission. And my mission is try to soothe the negativity of both communities. When you look out the window at the door and you see these beautiful mountains, not only look at the mountains, but the very few left that understand the mountains. And as Paul Harvey would say, there's the rest of the story. Preserve and protect. Hi, hi. If I had a chance, I had a whole bunch of pictures and videos I would have showed you that I garnered over the last 20 years. It's unfortunate that I was been wanting to do this, but the schools, both schools, don't call. And I just got a call last night. They must have heard I was going to do this. They invite me to the history class in Box Elder. So I told them I'd be glad to. I'd be glad to. I walked in, my one daughter goes to school there. We had what they call parent-teacher conference, so we went there. My wife and I, we were sitting there on a wall, great big wall. I kept looking at that picture, and my daughter must have seen me. She's about 13. What's that picture tell you, Dad? I know the history of that picture. It has, it says, Mite, heart, but it's spelled different. It's called Mihta. Mihta is wood. So the first thing, you probably have to correct that. The second part is they got this picture of Little Bear and all these Indians. I said, that picture, I asked that history teacher, you know anything about that picture? Yeah, I said, that's the Chippewa Cree Indians. I said, no. That picture there is all Cree Indians. Are you sure? I said, I know. My grandpa was talking about that. That picture was taken on their way back from Cincinnati, Ohio. If you all remember Buffalo Bill Cody at that time, had his Wild West show. Well, one of his workers was doing the same thing and seen what he was, probably the money that he'd seen. So he did the same, want to do the same. So all these Cree Indians was in Helena, employed them. Got them on a train, their wagons, animals, and off to the first show in Bellevue, Kentucky. They performed there. But that's a different presentation. That's where that picture is at. And I identified most of those people in that picture. And I asked my grandpa, how come you guys didn't go? It was in 1895. I wasn't born then. My sisters were. My dad, they said, no. And there a lot of people didn't go. But those few, to include Little Bear, was in that performance. And they were left there on the banks of the Ohio River. This Colonel Beveridge, because his plan was take them to New York, get on a boat, go across, same thing that Buffalo Bill done. So after her first performance, they told them what they were going to do. And the interpreter for these Crees was a guy named Le Flambeau, which later became probably Le Framboise. So they said, no, they're not going. So they left them there on the banks of the Ohio River, just with the clothes on their back. And then some good people from Cincinnati came by. But in order for them to take them to Cincinnati, they had to pay a fine or a bill against them, because that guy hired an artist to paint these billboards and programs and material. So they got together and they paid. So that's all the picture they have was they were housed at the Cincinnati Zoo. The outfits in that picture were all birds in that zoo. And I go on and on about that. Because my grandpa said, I remember my dad saying, when that train come back with those Crees, east of Havre, oh, they seen these Bear Paw Mountains. And they jumped off while the train was going to get to there. The significance of the Bear Paws is lost, not only to my tribe, but many tribes. Hi.